Welcome to Healing Generations, a podcast creating a dialogue uplifting the importance of healing, strengthening, and supporting our communities, and that addresses the disparities and inequities in communities of color. Healing Generations is brought to you by the Healing Generations Institute, a collaborative initiative of the National Compadres Network and the Brotherhood of Elders. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on our new releases.
Omatyorl, Noxtin, Namakayatsin, we'd like to welcome you all today to this dialogue, to this journey. We call it a podcast, Healing Generations podcast that is really about uplifting the medicine, the teachings, the spirit of our ancestors, and bringing it here forth so we can remember and recover and then grow it in a good way. At the same time, we recognize that part of that journey is the duality. And so part of our intention here is to also lift up and talk about the wounds and talk about the trauma and talk about the issues that many of our ancestors, but also we face now today. So we're hoping to bring light to those so that we can embrace those and address those in a good way. And so I want to thank you for joining us today. And I want to begin by just saying, Omatyorl, Creator, we thank you and acknowledge all the ancestors. As you sit here today listening, I want you just to think about your relatives, your ancestors, and by name or by spirit, and just call them in. Have them join us. Just imagine we're sitting around a good, cozy fire and just welcoming people in. Just come on and sit with us and share with us. And maybe some of those ancestors need some healing too. But maybe they just need to be with someone. And so we're going to welcome them in and ask them to guide us today, in this way. We want also you to acknowledge, where you're sitting, that land that you're sitting on, that indigenous land. Acknowledge those relatives there and say thank you. We say, Qassataq, thank you for allowing us to be there, and invite their spirits in too, because it's because of them that we are allowed to do what we do wherever we're at. And then bring yourself and your own relatives in here so we can have a good journey, a good time, a good dialogue. We will see where it takes us today, as we begin this year, part of winter here. Yeah. And I'm just really, really very happy, so pleased, joyful to have with us today, someone that I consider a relative, consider a sister, a colleague, a friend, a loved one, someone that's walking with us together in this process for us to return our world and return our universe and return our community to sacredness, And I'm talking about Ayyu Qassataq, and it's just so beautiful to have you here and for us to be able to dialogue, for us to be able to spend time. I wish we were in person, and we will be. We will all gather someday and be in person this way. But until we do that, then I'm glad just to be here with you. So I want to give you the opportunity to welcome folks in today.
Qassataq, brother. I really appreciate that welcome, setting that intention in prayer for our time. I think that's such a beautiful way to start. And I echo what you said. Every time we've been able to spend time together, I feel like I leave more grounded, connected, and full of gratitude. So, Qassataq for that. I'm Ayyu Qassataq, Ungalaklik Milrunga. I come from Ungalaklik, and I am currently living, working, and raising my 4 children on Dena'ina lands in Ayyu, also known as Anchorage, Alaska. And I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge you for, your journey. There's so many lessons, I'm sure, and that have come along that way that you're now sharing, and that helps you to be with people and guide them in that way. I also know that, just as an important sense of acknowledgement that, you've also traveled that Western world and received those degrees. And, so I want to acknowledge that too, because those are not easy roads. Those are not easy places to be in, easy places to get through, you getting a bachelor's in organizational management. Wow. I'm not even sure what that is, but it's something about
Me either.
managing and organizing, and then a master's in rural development too. And I want to just acknowledge you for that, because I know it's not easy in institutions to get those those degrees that way, and now you also are part of the First Alaskan Institute that does such amazing work, such amazing, beautiful work with community that way. And so I want to acknowledge all of that and so much more. But I'd like to ask you if we could begin with just telling us a little bit about your family and your lineage and your journey, and share with us, a little about that.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Kleanakbak. I am, so let's see. Inupiaq. I'm Inupiaq, which I think in the broader Western context, they like to tuck us under the umbrella of Eskimo, but we don't refer to ourselves in that way. Inupiaq, I come from Ungalaklik, where the east wind blows. It's on the western coast of Alaska. And it's actually the southernmost Inupiaq community, I think, in the world. Our Inupiaq people are connected to all the Inuit across the top of what is now called Canada and over into Greenland. Those are all of our relatives. So those are the people that I am connected to and come from. My name, Ayyu, only recently became my Western recognized legal name. Ayyu has always been my Inupiaq name, which in our naming traditions as Inupiaq people, generally when a child is born, that is when they would be named, they would be given the Inupiaq name of a loved one who has passed. And it varies from community to community. For some, it's a relative or a loved one who recently passed. In others, it could be someone who had passed quite some time before. In some communities, our names are gendered, and so you would follow the same gender of the person who passed. In others, that's less of a consideration. And so for me, I am named for my grandmother's mother, who had passed in the mid to late 70s. And my grandmother, Bunyuk, Irene Kitchtag, was very eager to pass on her mother's name, because in our way, to be given the Inupiaq name is to honor the continuation of that spirit throughout all of time. And when we give our children Inupiaq names, it grounds and connects them, and they come to embody that name throughout their lifetime here on this earth. And so our names connect us all the way to the very beginning of time. And they connect us all the way to our future ancestors and whatever that end of time, if there is an end of time, would look like. And so we're connected to all of our people through our names. So my grandmother, Banyok, was very eager to bestow her mother's name after her mother's passing. But a series of grandsons were born, and so she just kept patiently waiting for a granddaughter to be born. And so when I was born, she was still home in Ungalaklik. My mother was here in Dagayakak, Anchorage. And my mother called her to let her know that I had been born and I was indeed a girl. My grandmother flew down on the next available flight, and my mom describes opening her apartment door and my grandmother pushing the door open past her, not even saying hello or anything to my mother, and hurrying over to me where I was bundled up, laying on the couch. And she picked me up and said, "Hi, Mom. I missed you."
Wow.
And I have felt that love, throughout my entire life. Growing up, I spent all of my summers back home in Umarlak. And, I'd be running around, and when I was introduced to folks, they would be introduced to my English name and go, yep. And then my grandma would say, "That's Ayyu." And they would look at me with fresh eyes because they could connect me to the Ayyu that they knew.
Wow.
And place me in this continuum of our ancestors, right? And so one of our revered Tlingit elders, who has since become an ancestor, Walter Soboleff, he, in his talking about the importance of our naming traditions, he said, throughout your life, as you were being raised, your name carries you. People know you by your name, and they know who you're named for. And it sets this really high expectation of how you will embody that name over your lifetime. And that there will come a time, if you're so blessed with a long life, that there will come a time when you carry the name and the name itself will become associated with you and how you show up in the world. And you're setting that high expectation for those who are going to follow. And so when I talk to my children about the ways that our cultural knowledge protects us, that's one of the ways that I share with them that our responsibility to our community transcends generations, and that we carry responsibility to our name. And so I think maybe I'll stop there. Ayyu is, my great grandmother, my grandmother's mother, Ayyu. And a few years ago, I legally changed my name to Qassataq, which is what my family's original name was prior to the missionaries arriving and renaming all of the people in our community. So when the missionaries came, they said, "Nope, you're not Qassataq, you're Qaqataq." And so a few years ago, my divorce presented the exciting opportunity to legally change my name to better reflect who I am and where I come from. So I reclaimed our family's name, our original name.
Wow. The way you share that resonates such a powerful feeling. I felt your grandmother and her saying, her greeting to you. And we know, I know in working in this world, the importance of welcoming that child, of the child knowing that we are your family, you're connected to us, we will hold you and take care of you. So, and what a powerful way, and so different than this Western society. But in you sharing that with me, even though I've known you for a number of years, it really just amplifies who IU is, who you are, and who you're connected to. So, I want to thank you so much just for offering that blessing to us. Maybe you can expound on that. You mentioned your children, and being a mother and raising children also is part of this journey, and the things that you learn, and especially as an Indigenous woman, trying to raise children in this society, and the struggles. I know my struggles of trying to raise my kids in a Western school, and some of the things that they would bring home and tell me they're learning, and it's like, oh my God, but also their own sense of identity. So maybe can you share a little bit about that journey, and that some of the lessons that you've learned along that way? I mean, and it's probably still learning because your children are still growing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, what's coming to the surface for me is a continuation of what we were just talking about, how our culture protects us. I recall having part of that conversation with my second oldest son in the aftermath of an attempted suicide in his school.
Hmm.
We were having conversation because I did not trust the way that the school or school psychologists would care for the thinking of the children who were processing that experience and what it meant. And so with my son, and I've since had this conversation with all of my children, we first talked about how our responsibility to our people protects us, how our cultural practices protect us. So one of those ways is our names, right? We have responsibility to our names throughout our lifetime, but also, I was reflecting on this experience that I had recently where I got to spend time in Inupiaq country on my homelands in a gathering of our people, and it was bringing together our elders and our youth and really sitting and listening with our elders who were speaking Inupiatun, which is our language, and them, speaking and speaking and speaking. And, if they felt called to translate into English, they would, but most of the time they didn't. And the ratio of elders to youth in that Inupiaq community was quite a few more elders than youth. And part of it is because of the high number of youth, particularly young men, who had committed suicide within that community. And so I was just sitting there feeling the weight of that knowledge. And also, I feel grieving the fact that through the ravages of colonization and the ways that those impacts still show up today in a world that does not lovingly reflect our peoples, our beauty, our knowledge, our contributions to making this world a better place, that through a process of colonization, it has stolen generations of our future elders from us. And I was really sitting with the enormity of that. Because culturally, we know that throughout every stage of our life, we carry a responsibility to our community. Part of that responsibility is to take care of the elder we're going to become so that we can then be of service in helping to guide our people. And I was just reflecting on how there is going to come a time in the not so distant future where we will have very few elders because of them being stolen from us through suicide and other ravages of our people, right? And so I was really just sitting and grieving that and feeling a sense of urgency that really tells us that we need to do as much as we possibly can right now to capture as much knowledge and guidance as we can from our elders right now, so that we, the living and healing generations now, can help carry that into the future as much as possible. But the conversation I was having with my son around the ways that our culture protects us is that remembering that at every stage of our life, we are taking care of the elder we're going to become because our people will need us. And that it's our responsibility to live a good life, not to live a perfect life, not to be without mistakes, but that we are committed to understanding and choosing a good path forward so that we can learn from that and then be able to be of service to our people as elders, that they're going to need us. And so it's our responsibility to take care of ourselves until then. So that was one of the conversations that I have tried to have with my children, is that even though they are young, they range in age from 9 to 18, they have a responsibility to take care of the elder they're going to become and to live a good life as much as they possibly can, because our people are going to need them.
As you're talking about this, two things come to mind for me. One thing is me as a teenager, right? And the struggle, because what I was being told is I was responsible for myself. I'm an individual. Take care of yourself. And the reason why you go through this stuff is so that you can be successful, right? So that you can have a income that will bring you, the material things that you need. And in the schooling, there was nothing about responsibility to family, responsibility to spirit, responsibility to community. There was nothing like that at all. And it really it really shook me because I began feeling more isolated, even though I was doing well in school, except for math. I was failing math. I wasn't good in math, but and I remember speaking of grandmothers is that my father had passed away when I was 13, and so I was feeling more isolated because I went to school the next day and nobody acknowledged it. Nobody acknowledged that I was grieving. Nobody acknowledged. I mean, and as a boy, I wasn't supposed to cry, so I couldn't have no way to process that, right? And no one showed me. My mom was working and doing the best she could, but I remember I got an F in algebra, and even though I was doing great with everything, I got an F in algebra, and that like shook me, right? To the point that as I was walking home, I didn't want to take the report card home to my mom because I didn't want to make her feel bad. She was working hard, and I remember thinking about suicide. I remember thinking, maybe I should just take myself out. Maybe this is not worth it. And in all the work that I've done with youth, there's this moment in which they begin thinking, and if they don't have the protective factors of community, of culture, to say that is not an option, if the sound of Western society and their ways is more resounding, then they listen to that more. The thing that happened is I was in this park contemplating that. And there was many ways that I could have done it. There was a gang neighborhood 2 blocks over. I could have walked in there and they would have shot me and killed me, and they would have thought it was gang behavior, but it wasn't really that. I could have went to the corner and got some drugs. I mean, there's all kinds of ways. But as I was standing there thinking about how I had already made a decision I was going to do it. I smelled my grandmother's powder, the one she used to wear. That every morning when she would come in, she would bless me up. And I smelled her. And when I smelled her, I knew I couldn't do this because I was connected to her. Because she believed in me and she said I was a blessing. Doesn't matter how good in school, you're still a blessing. And she told me that every day in her language. So when I needed it, my grandmother's spirit showed up. And I said, well, I guess I can't do this now. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I can't do this. And I was standing on a tree and I walked around the tree and there's a $20 bill on the ground. I said, dang, Grandma, you're deep, boy. She sent me $20 too. But it's those signs that if you really know, if you really recognize your ancestors, they're there. But if you've been indoctrinated that you are an individual, you're by yourself, don't worry about nobody else, and your wrongdoing will bring shame, so don't even go to your family, don't even go to your culture, then that separates you that way too. Mm-hmm. So, I want to just reinforce that teaching that you're giving right now of and your children are so blessed that you sit with them and you grieve and you dialogue with them. And you may not have the answer, but it's not about having the answer. It's about we're in this journey together. And whatever you do affects me, and whatever I do affects you. And that goes back to that ancestor teaching that you'll become that ancestor. So, that it just brings that so much to mind, and I'm sure, that this is an ongoing thing in raising children, but it's also a very significant aspect of justice, of racial equity, of racial healing, and I know that has been also a major part of your work in terms of, racial justice and racial healing for especially indigenous people, but for all people. So can you talk a little bit about that and the connection between all of that? Because I think it is all interconnected.
Oh, yeah. My goodness. It sure is. Um, as I as I was listening to you, Kliamakbak, for sharing your family with me and sharing that experience. I feel a lot of gratitude for your grandmother being with you in that moment
Mm.
so that you're here right now and we're sharing this time together
Yeah.
and all the good work you've gotten to do since then. What an incredible blessing.
Mm.
So, Kliamakbak, for sharing that. I was thinking as you were talking how one of the biggest tricks that colonialism has pulled on us is making us believe that we only belong to ourselves.
Mm.
And I feel honestly like it's one of the biggest travesties of a Western way of thinking, because there's so much power in remembering that we don't belong to ourselves. We belong to our family and community and to our ancestors, and we carry responsibility for that. So I just wanted to reflect that, and also, talking about like healing and justice. I feel like so much of the work that we do is around re-educating,
Mm.
having to unlearn the false narratives that have been taught about us, to us, through us, and have to really grapple with and wrestle with understanding our history when there's been so many efforts to hide it. But I guess what I'm thinking about is some experiences that I've had recently related to healing and to understanding how history shows up today.
Mm.
And I would say that for me, a lot of how I have centered my own healing, and I share this with permission of my mother, is in understanding and healing our relationship as mother and daughter, and understanding the dynamics that we've inherited, that, in fact, we've inherited generations deep, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, on a more recent level, my mother was part of the boarding school generation. And so I can come to understand some of her behaviors through that lens, and understanding psychologically what is happening to young people who are taken away from everything that they know and taught that we do not come from beautiful people, that our ways are not valid, or that other people's histories and contributions are more important and centered. And so, there's that level of understanding within my mom's generation. But then I go further back. And part of what I have been really pondering and reflecting on over the last year, especially, has been around our names. Because we believe that we are the living embodiment of the name in this time.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that the relationships that we have had throughout all of time continue even today. And so I've had some pretty transformative experiences of encountering that relationship from other times in this time. I'll give you one example of that. It's related to my youngest son, Inualurak. Inualurak, roughly translated, means old house, but it really means old soul.
Mm.
Inualurak, he is named for Bert Econ, who was my namesake's second husband. And, my youngest child, ever since he was an infant, has just been so incredibly affectionate. Ever since he was a baby, like, he just loves to snuggle up on me and smell me and, like, just be all up in my neck. And, like, he's just always been that way. And I remember one morning a few years ago, he, came into bed with me in the morning and was just like really snuggling up with me and just, like squishing on my belly, and just really couldn't get close enough. Like, he just was really needing to be close to me. And I was like, I love you, Inualurak. Pikpakakben. Inuatlurak. And he goes, I love you, my Ayyu. And when he said that, it suddenly became so clear to me why he is so affectionate and loving to me. You know, Ayyu became a widow as a fairly young woman and then was a very independent woman for quite some time. And Inuatlurak loved her and really deeply cared for her and really tried to court her in their elder years, you know, bringing her food, bringing her on boat rides and these kinds of things. And then finally she gave in and they got married in their older years and had a very sweet and loving relationship until the end of their time here. And so I was realizing, like, oh my gosh, Ayyu and Inuatlurak back together again. Like, that's just so incredibly beautiful and just helped me to understand some of the nature of my relationship with my son in this time. And that showed up again, actually, recently when I was going through my master's program that you were just talking about. And my master's thesis, my research was really around trying to go back through and understand the history of my community through our lens, because it's often told through someone else's narrative and usually the narrative of people who did not love us. And so I wanted to understand the events that led to us no longer singing and dancing as a community and what was actually transpiring in the world around the time of the missionaries' arrival and how they influenced and shaped us, putting that part of ourselves to sleep. So that was the research that I was doing for my master's. And I was part of a cohort. And so in each class, you're doing essentially parts of your thesis, and then you're presenting them to each other. And so you're part of a cohort that we get to know each other's research really well. And so one of my classmates towards the end of my program sent me a message with a recording he had taken while being in the archives of the university. He said, you may already have access to this, but I found this and thought that it might be something you'd like to hear. And so I opened it, and it's a recording that was taken in 1950 in Kotzebue, which is an Inupiaq community further north of mine. And this radio person was saying, Kotzebue, Alaska, 1950. We're talking to Bredikin from Unalakleet. He's going to sing a song for us from the Messenger Feast. He doesn't remember the words, but he'll sing us the tune. And then he hands it over, and this man starts to sing. He doesn't introduce himself or anything. He just starts to sing. Well, I received this message while I was in my office, and almost as soon as he started singing, I burst into tears. I was sitting there, and it felt like the emotion I experienced was so much bigger than myself. And I just was sitting there sobbing, listening to these two songs that I had never heard before. And, you know, we're in this process of reclaiming our songs. And so I've heard several of our songs, and I'm always very moved by them, but I had never had that experience. And in fact, I after I listened to the songs a couple of times and was just sobbing my eyes out at my desk, I ended up going over to Lagunai's office, and she was worried when she saw me just like tear stained. And then I told her what I heard, and then we cried together. But I was really kind of taken aback by how powerful my reaction to that was. Well, fast forward to later that year, I'm, on Zoom with a group of us from home, who all come together around the awakening of our singing and dancing. and we're listening to the songs that we've been able to, reclaim and are translating them and setting motion to them to wake them back up and be able to sing and dance them again. And so the day came when we were listening to that recording, and we listened to it a couple of times, and then we were just having conversation about it. And one of the folks on the call with us said, "Who's Bert Eakin? I'm trying to think of who that would have been, 1950, Bert Eakin." And one of the others on the call was like, "Oh, it's Bert Econ."
Oh.
And when she said that, I felt like my heart burst because Bert Econ is Inuit. My honey was singing to me, and that's why I just burst into tears and just was completely overwhelmed by that reconnection in this time, Anyway, I feel like I kind of digressed a little bit, but it's just, I feel like that's where some of the centering of my healing intentions has been around healing through our names and connecting to our ancestors. And part of what has helped me with this process has been really getting wrapped into the Tlingit practice of the Dashkuch, the cold ocean dipping, and how setting intention to understand the healing that needs to happen within my family has really just brought me, I feel like I've transcended to an entirely other time and place, to where I am able to actually feel and experience and have conversations with the Ayyus who've come before me, and in connection to my relationship with others around me. So it's been really a profound experience.
Well, I think this is another whole level where Western society has no level of understanding of what our music, what our rhythms, what our vibrations mean to us, what our movements mean to us, and that we can enact or replicate a movement of our grandmother or grandfather and be them and really feel their spirit. They come within our bodies, they come within our spirits, and to me, the medicine of that, because when we talk about the issues that a lot of our young people are feeling, depression, anxiety, suicide, that's all disconnection, that's all the dislocation, and so when you speak of you unknowingly just crying because of a love connection that comes through a song, it really speaks to the healing medicine that our people, that kept them alive, that kept us awake, and it also points to the work we need to do in terms of recovering all of that. Because in order for our children to be better, in order for there to be less pain as we move to the next generation, then we have to recover, we have to reclaim, and we have to reroute the medicine that our people carry. And so, what a beautiful story! What a beautiful love story! It's like that's a book, that's a movie right there, and the sadness to me that comes is that without the consciousness, you miss that. Without the understanding and the acknowledgement, our children miss that, and all these miracles, all these beautiful blessings that are happening, they don't recognize because they're being taught in a whole different conceptual framework of looking at things. So what you're speaking of and the work that you all do, I know that conference that you do, elder youth, I mean, all of these now ways of reclaiming, of passing on knowledge, of passing on teachings, are so necessary, for all of us in the universe. We need this. I mean, especially right now, where a lot of us people are struggling with this pandemic. But at the same time, there's a realization, and people are not connecting to it, but of the suffering that many of our people went through, for many, many years, of losing so many relatives, of disease being brought to our communities, and so many of our people dying without knowing when it's going to end. This is a recollection of what when many indigenous people have suffered with, for many generations, and then being separated, not being able to see your family, right? I mean, you're in boarding school, pulling you away from your own families. And I mean, I saw my grandson yesterday and I miss him already, and so it's like, so the unimaginable pain of when you're ripped away from relatives. And that's that's the wounds that we're healing from. That's the wounds that our young people carry unknowingly, unless we, intentionally begin to transform the pain into healing. So, I really I want to thank you for the story, first of all, that just brought, just love in my heart, but also for that, for the wisdom of being able to translate that into what your ancestors would have wanted you to say. I mean, and I think that's what we need to be sharing, today with the young people, but also among ourselves, because there's many of us that are wounded, that are living in a colonized way, including ourselves. We're learning and shedding all the time.
Yeah. There's something that you said that reminded me of another thing that I wanted to share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You were talking about how depression, anxiety, and these things really are a symptom of disconnection. And I believe also this false notion that we believe only to ourselves and feel disconnected and isolated from our community.
Mm-hmm.
And as Indigenous people, when we seek out and encounter the histories that help explain why things are the way that they are, it really does trigger this really intense cycle of emotions that, we have to go through in order to be able to heal the disbelief, the anger, the outrage, the rage, the sadness, the grieving for what our people have experienced. We have to make space for moving through those emotions. And when we continue to be tricked into believing that we only belong to ourselves, it can be such a deeply isolating place to be in, especially when you look around and realize that, it's like we're in the Matrix and we took the red pill and everyone else is still walking around and has no idea. And we're like, now we know why things are the way that they are, and most people don't. So it can trigger all of these feelings, but it's something I've been sitting with lately because, I've experienced depression and anxiety issues throughout all of my life, at times pretty debilitatingly so. But I had a realization just a couple of months ago when I was really reflecting on how the experiences of all of the ancestors before me live within me. We talk about that in so many different forms, right?
Mm-hmm.
We carry them in our DNA and all of these kinds of things in ways that people talk about it. But what that made me think about a little bit differently is that as we're raging and grieving and healing around the injustice of what our ancestors have experienced, they are still within us.
Mm-hmm.
And that one of the ways that we can not only honor our ancestors, but also to bring healing throughout time, is to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
Because when we are treating our own mind, body, spirit with care, we are also giving that love and care to our ancestors who are within us. And that shifted my thinking to realize I can pour love into our ancestors by taking care of myself.
Right.
And by speaking lovingly to myself, because I'm not just speaking to me. I'm speaking to them as I want them to hear me.
Yeah.
And that was just a really profound, another connection point of
Yeah.
belonging to greater than ourselves,
Yeah.
belonging to our past ancestors and taking care of them within us.
Yeah. And the profoundness of that then triggered in me why sometimes there are certain actions we need to take to step out of certain relationships or step out of certain situations to break a cycle of what our ancestors have had to carry. And so we sometimes have to make decisions or choose who we hang out with or we don't, or choose what we do and what we don't do anymore, in order not only to heal ourselves, but to heal our ancestors' pain that they've been carrying and putting into maybe some hurtful practices too. And it reminds me of this youngster that I was talking to, that he was heavily involved in violence and in a gang and everything, and his dad had been in that too, and his grandfather too. And I remember telling him, I said, young man, do you not understand the power that you have? That you're 15 years old. You can break cycles and you can bring the medicine back. You. And he looked at me with these strange eyes, like, what are you talking? I said, you don't understand the sacredness of what you carry. Because he was a very happy-go-lucky, kind of had a great personality, but he was in so much pain. And his behavior was reeling on that pain. And then all of a sudden I saw his ancestor in him. And I said to him, I said, do you not realize who you are? And he looked at me very strange, because no one had ever talked to him like that, you know. But there was this realization that went on, and I had to repeat that to him many, many times, and until finally he seemed to get it. And in fact, one of the times he came, he said, you told me that if I shift this way, he says, my sister, she got lucky and got, I said, that's not just luck, man. I said, you're doing some work here, and look at the blessings that are now coming down to your sister. I mean, people don't realize that when you do this work, your ancestors are going to bless you too, in these such beautiful ways, and so, you are just, wow. This makes me again look so forward to when all of us can gather, because these are the teachings and the conversations we need to have. Because as you're sitting there, you're healing me. You're bringing my grandmother and my ancestors. They're sitting right here next to me, real proud. You know, in that way, and I think that's what happens when we are able to talk in this way, in this sacred way with each other. You know. So just your presence, Ayyu, just your presence and all your generations of Ayyus, bring blessings and healing to the world in so many ways. And so I'm wondering, as we close out today, if you would share whatever teaching, whatever counsel, whatever advice, whatever comes through you that you could offer to that next generation, to people out there that are listening, that, I always think, what would I have told my younger self that I would needed to hear? But whatever you're feeling right now, whatever the ancestors is telling you to share right now, what would that be?
Well, what's coming to the surface for me right now is, though anyone listening can't see this, I have tattooed on my chin our traditional tavleren, and I'm feeling like the lessons that I've learned from bringing that tradition back into my family, that ancestral tradition of women's tattoos,
Mm,
um, is one that has profoundly changed my life. So in 2017, I had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And as I was preparing to embark on treatment, it was also a very stormy time of my life. I was separated from my husband. Things were just incredibly tumultuous at
mm,
home and just within me. And, like I had shared before, depression was something that I had really struggled with. especially prior to that point. And so I knew that I really needed to have something on the other side to look forward to, that I would be reaching for throughout my treatment, a guiding light that could help me. And so it actually came to me in that time that when I would reach the other side of treatment and become completely healthy and well again, that I would mark that return to health with my traditional tavloghan. Traditionally, the tavloghan would be tattooed within our community by an elder when you became a woman or at other important milestones of your life. And it just felt like that was right for me. And so throughout treatment, I was really kind of in this space of thinking about the meaning that I wanted mine to carry, because currently the meanings of the different lines in my community are still asleep. And so I spent time throughout the next 9 months or so just pondering on what I wanted mine to look like. And so made it all the way through chemo, surgery, radiation, and was pronounced cancer-free. And so I began the preparation of getting ready to do my tavloghan. I had decided when I was going through chemo that when the time came that I would tattoo myself, because it could serve as a reminder of how incredibly beautiful and strong our traditions are, and the ways that they strengthen us, and that we can overcome anything when we're centered in our ways. So the day came when I was prepared to have my ceremony. I had invited my chosen sisters. I had my children with me. My mother was with me. And so we prepared ceremony for me doing my tattoo. And I had gone to pick up my children. And as we were driving back to my house for the ceremony, my older boys were asking, so what design did you choose? What were you planning to mark your tavloghan with? And I told them that I had chosen to mark my tavloghan with 2 lines. And one of my sons said, 2 lines? That's weird. I feel like I've been seeing you draw 3 lines this whole time. Why are you going with 2 lines? And I said, well, it's to mark our past and our future ancestors, and to remind me every day that we're occupying this space between. And I'd been in this battle for my life where I was facing my own mortality. And so every time I would think about the meaning I had chosen, it brought me to tears. And that was why I felt strongly like that's what it needs to be. So my banik, my only daughter, she was in the very back of the car, and she said, "Mama," and just her voice stopped me short. And so I looked in the rearview mirror, and her eyes were just shiny, and her face, she was so angry. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, you can't have 2 lines. And I said, why not? Why do you feel so strongly about this? And she said, we're here for you. We're here for you. You have to be there. You're not invisible.
Wow.
And it just floored me. My daughter in that moment reminded me of that teaching. She was 8 years old. No, at that time she was 7, hadn't turned 8 yet. She reminded me that we're born into the time that we are because the gifts we're born with are needed in this time. And that the gifts we're born with don't belong to us. They belong to our community. And our job is to accept the gifts that we've been given and grow them in service to our community throughout our life. And that's our job. It's not about us. It's never about us. It's not for our own gain. It's for our community. And so she, in that profound teaching, reminded me how important it is to mark our responsibility to our community. And so, as you can see, I have 3 lines
Right.
that mark our past, our current, and our future ancestors, and connecting all of us. So that's what I feel I want to bring into the space, that reminder that we're here with profound purpose because our community needs every single one of us.
Yeah.
And to lean into that responsibility.
Wow. Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that reminder. And now thank you. I just want to say thank you to you and to all your ancestors and to the medicine that you bring, to the medicine that you are, to the reminder of what our people want us to know and never forget. I want to thank you for your love and your friendship and your strength. Your warriorness as a woman, of being willing to battle through the struggles, and come through with a smile. I mean, I know it's not always a smile, but when you smile, there's this beautiful light that goes on. And at the same time, I want to acknowledge you as a mother, because throughout all today in our conversation, your children have been um, a central part of the teachings, and that reinforces the interconnectedness of who we are. That this is not about us. It's really about who we're connected to and who we're responsible to and who's coming behind us that way. And so, I just want to ask the Creator and the ancestors' blessing of you, of your family, and all your relations, and thank you for being all that you are to so many people. But I really appreciate you sharing the teachings that you shared today, and any final words you'd like to share as we close up.
No, just to say, Pikpakikben, I love you. Kuyanakbak, for this time together. It's been a gift.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And as we have listened right now, we recognize the blessings of being in relationship, and of sitting with relatives, and of talking, and of listening, and of hearing, and of crying and laughing, and all those things of coming when we choose to spend the time. I would challenge all of you listening to reach out to someone and spend some time to dialogue, and laugh and cry, and share, but just connect. It's a time of connection, and I know it's sometimes we can't do it, in person, but the spirit is very, very big, and you can feel each other, and love each other, and heal each other, even across phone lines and Zoom lines, and hopefully you felt this today in this podcast. The medicine is out there for you. Hold it, embrace it, and recognize your sacredness, and then share it. Give it to the community and share it that way. In my language, we say Nawake, which means interconnected sacredness, because we are all interconnected. And hopefully during this time we healed a little bit, and learned a little bit, and maybe make our life just a little bit better all the way around. I want to thank you all, relatives, and thank the ancestors for guiding us today. And we'll see you next time. Tlaskaman.
For more information about Healing Generations and the Healing Generations Institute, visit nationalcompadresnetwork.org and be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with our new releases.